wellnesscouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, featuring your hosts Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Julie Tenner.
And I'm Bridget Wood. And today's podcast is all about consciously parenting. So it sounds a little bit one-sided, which we like to always balance. So that's what we're going to do a lot of in this episode. And it's really going to be about talking about what our children, first of all, reveal to us about ourselves and how we can bring greater awareness to our own triggers and our own patterns. But I think we need to preface this with some words around the fact that there is some unrealistic ideals out there around parenting and around how we are supposed to be all things to our children and how we, mothers have enough going on to throw another kind of lump of guilt or shame on who we are in our role for our children and how what we display to them impacts them. Because the truth is we are all both conscious and unconscious creatures all the time. And I think, as I was recounting to Julie before we started this podcast, whenever I think I'm on this conscious path, I'll have a total day of awareness of my own unconscious just to humble myself, because the truth is we are always growing. And yes, that mother-child relationship is going to push us potentially the most, but the first step in any kind of awareness as parents is seeing the challenges that we have, seeing the triggers, seeing our own trip-ups, and loving them first before we then try to change them.
Oh my gosh, that's so gorgeous. I think I might just listen to you for the next half an hour. Keep going.
I think because in some ways, and I talked a little bit about this in a recent article that I wrote, that idea that I could be a conscious person if I ticked all these external boxes. So for me, conscious parenting was like the labels that come with it. So it was like the perception that you're a conscious parent if you baby wear and you use cloth nappies and you, with your child all the time, and all these kind of vestiges of, I suppose, more attachment style parenting. And sometimes all that counts for nothing if you can't see your child for who they really are and see your child for what they're representing about you, because so much of our ego gets in the way about, who our child should be and what's good or bad behaviour, and, where does your child finish and you start, what's that line? And I think sometimes it's so difficult to see, particularly when we're in those moments of engulfed with the rage that can come with parenting a young child. I don't know. I think it's really important to first of all take a step back and throw away the books that are all about fixing your kid first of all, because it's never just your child, it's the two of you in a dynamic. But also simply just observe, create the space to observe your child and yourself and what they're bringing up for you. Because unless you can observe that, it's all just lip service. It's all just, little Band-Aid measures on something that's so intricately interwoven that we can't begin to understand it. I mean, we talked a little bit about this in the Family Dynamics podcast, didn't we? Yeah. Around that idea.
We've darted around it several times, I think, in several podcasts.
And, I mean, in spiritual circles there's that idea, or, I think everyone has this sense that, you get the child that's right for you, that you are given the child for your own growth.
Yeah, I don't think the depth of that is understood, though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've talked about it before that at the moment of conception, whatever you're repressing or condemning, whether you're conscious of it or not, your child will express for the purpose of your own involvement. So, and that's that idea that our purpose here is to love and to become whole, and so we will create the relationships and scenarios in our life in which to become more whole, and that will involve button pressing and discomfort and challenge and pain and all those things that our human nature wants to avoid. And all of those things come in the form quite often of those closest to us, which is why family chaos is pretty much the definition of family, because you can't have peace all the time. You can't have, happy families, because everyone's kind of rubbing against each other all the time, trying to find their path of growth. I think the more we try and attach to that idea of the calm, connected, present, always get along family ideal, the more we'll create the chaos to see that we need both to grow. And so a lot of what's got me coming back to this idea, I guess, has been a book I'm reading called The Conscious Parent by Shefali Sabri. And it's one of the few books, and it aligns a lot with aware parenting, which is what Jules and I talk quite a bit about. And it's really, her tagline is transforming ourselves to empower our children. She's been featured on Oprah, Super Soul Sunday, and she's really quite well regarded. She's a clinical psychologist, does a lot of psychotherapy with lots of different families and children. And it's just the most fascinating book because it takes you through just different family dynamics and points out how much the parents' own story, own experiences, own unconscious patterning, own desire to control things manifests in the relationship that they have with their child.
Can you give an example of that?
Yeah, I'll find a good one. Yes, I've got an example here actually. So this is a couple, Anthony and Tina, in the book, who had been struggling with their son's learning disabilities for years. A high-achieving couple, they were unable to come to terms with their son's academic limitations. Sean's learning disabilities weren't limited to academics, but also encompassed his ability to socialise and handle life in general. Indeed, he couldn't have been more different from the fantasies his parents had of him had he tried. Although Anthony, his father, was a star tennis player and a cycling enthusiast, Sean hated the outdoors, was terrified of insects, and preferred to play video games or read in his room. Exasperated by his son's idiosyncratic personality, Anthony belittled him daily. Tina, his mother, was a high-powered attorney, believed that men should be strong and dominant, which meant she was irritated by her son's tentative ways. Trying to man him up, she wanted him to work out at the gym, wear cooler clothes, and talk to girls, even though he was terrified of them. Homework and examination times were peak periods of stress and strife. Sean couldn't cope with the demands of mainstream education, a fact his parents wouldn't accept. Though each of his parents had a different approach to handling their son, both were abusive, called him names and yelled at him, ridiculing his inability to learn basic math and not allowing him to eat until he had mastered a concept. When I talked with them, they kept emphasising, "Our son isn't retarded, he doesn't belong with those people in special education." Fights were a daily occurrence in this household. If it wasn't Sean and his father fighting, it was Sean and his mother. Anthony and Tina reached such a state of despair in trying to parent their son, they stopped acting as a team, slowly coming to resent each other and inevitably drifting apart. When they announced they had decided to get a divorce, it was no surprise to me, and neither was the reason they gave. "We can't take Sean's behaviour. He's driving a wedge between us. We can't deal with him anymore. He makes us crazy." When Anthony and Tina told Sean that it was because of him they were separating, they imagined this would jolt him out of his bad behaviour. Having found a target for their misery in their son, they actually believed that were it not for Sean, they'd be happy together. Though they took his behaviour as a personal affront, it was in truth a painful reminder of their own failings as a couple. Sean, for his part, had grown so accustomed to being the vessel of his parents' anguish that he played the part of the demon to the hilt. It was only when Anthony and Tina were willing to see how their negativity stemmed from their basic inability to accept their son that they embarked on the process of transformation, a process that required them to confront their anxiety about Sean's differentness. As they became aware of their unconscious patterns, they began noting how they dumped these onto Sean, who then acted out these patterns, thereby causing them more problems. As Anthony and Tina realised how they had been inflicting their own agenda on their son, they began addressing the real issue, their relationship as a couple. After many painful months of working on the rift in their marriage, they were able to release Sean from the burden of carrying their pain. And that's a pretty drastic story, right?
Yeah, it is.
But it's a powerful example of how our own unconsciousness or our own patterns or our own focus on the way we think things should be in our children or who our children should what our children should live up to can play out in the relationship that we have with them. It's big stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think that, any of our listeners would identify with something as drastic as that. But, I even know in my own desire sometimes to control things and how I feel my hackles raised when things aren't a certain way, and when I recognise that I have unreasonable expectations of a 3-year-old. That all comes from, perhaps how I was spoken to when I was that age, or the dynamic or how my mum felt when the house was a mess, and that I'm plugging back into that now as my child presses my buttons on it. And it's just in those littlest of ways that we can become aware of how it's not ever really like our child's behaviour, it's our reaction to it, because they are kind of breaking the illusion that we might have of the way things need to be, in inverted commas.
Yes, I want to really bring it back to what that story highlights, and I suppose string that out, Bridget, because I can hear that it's really singing to you, and there's lots that you're kind of like going, yes, as you're reading this book, which is just marvellous. I want to share that wisdom. So when I'm hearing that story, what I'm picking up on is what is being repressed and therefore not given awareness or voice to within the parents is being expressed by the child in front of them in a way that they can't ignore. So it's kind of like when we talk about the whisperings of your soul, it's your soul kind of, or the universe taking control rather than you having the option of directing where that life leads and going, here's what you haven't paid attention to, so smack bang in your face until you really start to learn the lessons that it's offering you, right?
Totally, yeah. And I think this is a classic example of that idea of whatever you repress will be expressed, or whatever you condemn will be expressed. Because if these two parents are, incredibly educated and incredibly attached to status and power and lifestyle and achievement, then, surely the biggest jolt to that is to have a child who isn't any of those things, who isn't going to meet any of that. And so really they're being forced into their own wounds.
So let's maybe just tease that out a little bit more, because I think this is a fascinating concept. What you repress is expressed, and therefore you are the perfect parent for this child and they are the perfect child for you, because you are literally expressing what the other is repressing in this perfect dynamic, right?
Yeah.
Or you could say that universally for any dynamic within an intimate relationship and family. So let's tease this out, because this is really, I think, really fascinating. When you start to see your relationships in this light, it can be profound and painful and awakening, like all in one breath, right?
And I think that this extreme example serves to explain that really well, because sometimes you need the extreme example to illustrate the concepts, right?
Yeah.
But, in this example, it's really that these parents were so attached to all of their outward vestiges of success, the high-powered attorney and the star tennis player, and, what success really looked like, and, to be great in the world, you needed to be this, this, and this, and this, and this. And to actually have a child that didn't meet any of those, measures that they held as most important in life, really gets them to own the other part of themselves that's not all those things. Because the truth is, we are all everything. We are all also lazy in certain areas. We are all also soft and weak and, fragile. And so to have if the more one-sided you are about how things should be.
And by one-sided means you're repressing the other side.
Yeah, that you're only seeing one side as being okay, or one side as good.
Yes.
And so that you're trying. So the more that you only own and be in that one side.
And the more you shove the other stuff into a cupboard.
Yeah, it'll come out and it'll blow out for you to really have to step up to. And, this would be an enormous, if we put ourselves in their shoes, what an painful, experience to have to go through and to have to own that.
Yeah.
But
the thing is, we all have our own variation of that at play every single day in every single relationship, right? So as much as that's, extreme, and hugely painful, we all have our own version of pain in our own relationships and within our own children dynamics and our own partnership and relationship dynamics. It's the same, right? It's just like mirrors everywhere.
Absolutely.
And depending on I guess the socially acceptable way to behave in each of those relationships probably allows you the extent to which you release the beast in that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's way easier to release the beast with our kids because we're in control of them.
And it's also very socially acceptable, right? That old or that dominant paradigm of the parent in control and the child as the controlled is very, very socially acceptable. So it's fine really to see children as lesser than and children as a pain in the ass, right?
Yeah.
But the truth is, a child, they're just in the form of a child, but they're still a person, they're still a whole person, who we should respect and just as much as we'd respect anyone.
Yeah.
But it's simply that we don't often have the grasp of consciousness to be aware of that. And, there's no mistakes with that because as children, we all go through this, most of us.
Yes.
And it calls us to pursue the lives that we pursue and the values that we then go on to seek out.
Yes. So this is probably one of the biggest epiphany moments for me as a parent, was to realise all those things I'd stacked up as guilt over the years, of all the things I'd done wrong, all the ways I'd fucked them up, all the way, and we did that How to Fuck Your Kids Up in that podcast.
Yeah.
Although that list of things that we all store internally, that is all of the roads we went left instead of right, and all the things
and we think we're wrong. Yeah.
Yep. Is saying that in actual fact they are just as perfect as all of the things we did right.
Yeah.
Because if you only ever got it right, and who knows what always right is anyway, but if you only ever did the right and the good, what sort of child and human do you think is coming out of that?
Yeah.
Like, there's no lessons, there's no adversity, there's no humility,
challenge.
there's no challenge, there's no learning, there's no growth. We grow through pain. We experience our sole purpose in action through the voids that have been created based on, in inverted commas, the trauma we've experienced as kids.
Yeah.
The point is you transform those into something extraordinary in your adult life, and then you have the opportunity to look at them with loving awareness and choose whether you're carrying the beliefs you've attached to that void, not that you want to undo the void.
No, because otherwise you're just going to run a story. You continue to be the victim and you'll run your story. I guess what you and I both see in terms of the value of parenting somewhat consciously, or being parenting from a place of seeking to be aware, first of all, of our own self, is that it then means that parenting can be an incredibly rich, soul-fulfilling experience as opposed to, a grind, and then that's the difference, right? Like, if you are to see your child as, your ultimate guru and spiritual teacher who, pisses you off, a fair amount of the time as well, that's what a place to grow from, and I find it interesting, and you can only do this if you create the space to listen to yourself, to actually really hear what's true for you, because
and what's coming up for you.
Yeah, and giving that presence.
Because the mirror is useless if you're not going to do the work for yourself to own what the mirror is giving you.
Yeah. And I definitely think to parent with a level of consciousness, or to parent seeking that way, is enormously painful at times, because it means that you're having to, instead of distracting from it, instead of numbing it, instead of slamming the door, instead of shoving down the crying, it's actually being present with what that feels like in you, to endure those tears, to seek the connection with your child when all you want to do is go away and hide in anger. Just like it, and it's just like that same vulnerability that we really have to display if we're going to create those same connections with our partners. And often we want to run away. There's a beautiful kind of passage in this book which says, "It's no surprise that we fail to tune into our children's essence. How can we listen to them when so many of us barely listen to ourselves? How can we feel their spirit and hear the beat of their heart if we can't do this in our own life? When we as parents have lost our inner compass, is it any wonder so many children grow up directionless, disconnected and discouraged? By losing contact with our inner world, we cripple our ability to parent from our essential being in the way conscious parenting requires." And that's why doing the work on yourself and seeing the value in your own spiritual and emotional growth for the benefit of your family and your own time here in this world is really critical. And that's been the path for both you and I, is transforming the way that we view motherhood, that we view our identity as women, that we view our role in raising children. You know, this is in many ways a paradigm shift. And I don't think there's enough conversation around this stuff. There's a hell of a lot of books you can go out there and seek on all of the behavioural problems in your children, all the things you need to fix in your children that are separate from you. But you start with you, and the dynamic transforms.
Because it no longer needs to be
It
there.
doesn't need to be there.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating, isn't it? But it's a completely different way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Like, even when I started on the aware parenting path, and I would say I was pretty conscious at that point anyway, and the facilitator of that would flip whatever, behavioural problem I was bringing up for my child, and we would workshop things to do with them, and then she'd flip it onto me, and I remember feeling hideously uncomfortable with that spotlight.
I couldn't even deal with that.
I couldn't even get it. Like, I remember not getting it. I remember being there going, the fuck? What is that even? What?
I went to one once, and we had to do like attachment play around our own attachments to our phone. And so it was like games we were playing about like somebody taking your phone away from you. And I didn't get it at all. I now see it's about us looking at the things that we use to numb our feelings and how that feels to have those things taken away from us to face our feelings. But it is such an abstract, challenging concept if you've never had any exposure to the idea that in fact you are the creator of your world,
which includes your children and their behaviour. Yeah.
But we all know this, right? Because the stuff that pushes your buttons and gets you riled up, your husband doesn't react to.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And things that you plug him in, you're like, chill out.
Yeah.
Because you've each got your own different set of triggers.
Yeah. Your own inner child.
Yeah.
With their own story.
Yeah. And our children are beautifully bringing this to us to say, hey, there's stuff here for you to work on. Yeah. There's gold here. And like, kudos to them because they keep doing it even though they keep copying it.
It's pretty profound, isn't it?
Like they keep going back for more and keep pushing the button even though they cop it.
Yes.
Because they're here for our growth.
And conversely as well.
And we're there for theirs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the mirror is beyond even just, like, as soon as you kind of go, oh my gosh, that's like, well, profound. It's amazing. But it's even bigger and deeper than that, right? That's only the first layer once you get that. The layer beyond that is the interplay of what they themselves are seeking to grow that's entangled in the story that we already have, which is how that soul is there in the first place. Like, there's so many layers to that story that it's not even just as simple as owning my own stuff, because whatever is at play there serves them.
And it's always transforming, right? Because you and your child are growing every day, and your child is moving through different stages which push different buttons for you. Like, I remember saying this to you. 3 is like doing my head in. Yeah. But since I've slowed down my life heaps, it's not, right? So that shows you
create more spaciousness. Yeah.
But wow, I just think it's just so interesting. I think that there's so much.
And I think I'd said to you at the time when you were saying that, but you've never been 3 before.
Yeah.
Because each time your child reaches that new age, it's you at that age, right? And you've never been that age before. You haven't had, by the time you're 3 kids into it, you're dealing with completely different stuff. You're nowhere near as triggered. And that's not because you're more relaxed. It's because you've actually had to face yourself for the third time.
Which I just think is just amazing.
Yeah, it is.
And that's that same thing, right, about parenting and how magically the second baby just seems to be easier. Yeah. It's not necessarily the baby, it's you. Yeah. You're not as often highly anxious. There's not as much stuff plugging you in. Yeah. It's less of your own story that's being projected out. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I keep having flashbacks too. I hear that, and I would normally subscribe to that, except that I know so many families that have had super easy first baby, which made them dive back in for that number 2, who's been an absolute freaking horror.
Really?
But that's almost like the flip of that fantasy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is bring the nightmare because of the fantasy that was created about how easy it was going to be.
Because I totally reflect back, and I can see that I had this fantasy around motherhood and fantasy around all of that stuff, and I just copped a walloping because with my first, and really it took me to the depths, which is why we're here, which is largely what's brought us here. between you and I connecting and this space being needing to be held and here. But I just love the concept of, even though it drives me bonkers sometimes, the idea of my kid reflecting me. You know?
Oh, it's like amazing. And even sometimes when they're doing something, there's that part of my brain that's kind of witnessing the whole thing like a movie going,
Yeah.
wow, what is that? Like I find myself doing that, which in itself, the act of bringing the awareness to that and playing almost like being the observer in the movie theatre, I suppose, is there's an element of that allows me to disconnect from being plugged into the trigger of it because I'm so used to knowing that that's my stuff being revealed. And what is it? And so it's that questioning that comes in. So
there's a curiosity to it as opposed to an initial emotional reaction.
Well, because I'm not defensive about it. So I'm not plugged into the trigger and the emotion. But not always. Like I'm 100% not like this perfect parent at all.
There is none.
Well, no, that's true as well. But you know, I espouse the philosophy, and I also sit with the 80-20 rule that 80% of the time I get it pretty right, and 20% of the time I completely fuck it up. And I don't even consider the fuck up a fuck up, though. That's the flip, though, is I completely see how no matter which way I choose to deal with that situation, there's learnings for everyone. I think
the key to get across when we say this idea that you can't fuck it up is also because you will get the learnings from it. So whichever way it goes, there will be richness in it because you will gain something from it. It's not looking at it from a point of indifference and going, oh, whatever I do doesn't matter. Because then that's not living with congruency and it's not learning. No, it's about seeing the benefits and how they universally play out within that. And owning the choices that you made and spending the time on going back about why you made those and do they sit, as you say, congruently with you authentically or do they not? And in which case bringing that alignment in. Because if you sit so far on that you're out of alignment, then your whole life starts to get really messy, chaotic and in your face loud until you become in alignment. Right? And
the more you are in your truth and living of that, the less there is of those conflict kind of situations coming up.
Totally.
All right, so we've kind of done a roundabouts on the philosophy behind this connection parent and the mirror that our children offer us in a dynamic to really ultimately heal our inner child and send us on a bigger spectrum and bigger life purpose than where we're currently at. And in doing that, we do that for them. Let's bring it down to real life daily practices and tools. What do you do and how do you handle your triggers?
So my first thing that I try to do is give myself presence in them, because if I'm not present with it, I will distract either myself or my son to try and move through it and not feel the pain of it and not get the message from it, right? Because the trigger's there for me to go, hello, something here for you, something here for you to own. So the first thing is really to go, okay, if I've got the space, which we don't always have, what's going on for me right now? This one's interesting, and a curiosity. So first of all, noticing that it's a trigger for me to try and separate it and my reaction from my child so that I'm not unleashing on him, because it's not fair. I mean, we can't avoid it, but as much as I can, I try to not make it about him and observe first if I'm getting emotional, and then I will go, okay, this is, interesting. What am I learning here about myself? It'll be a series of questions and also a sense of presence, as I've said. I'm going in circles here because that's very interesting. But ultimately, it is a slowing down, and it is looking at him and saying to him, I hear what's going on for you right now. And if I'm highly triggered, it'll be, I'm really sorry that I'm frustrated, and I appear to be taking it out on you, but I need some space right now. So I'll actually be almost kind of, what's that word
narrating.
Narrating what I'm feeling, because I want to demonstrate for him ownership of my emotions and awareness of what's going on in my body. Like, we talk a lot about our bodies and stored feelings and what they try to tell us. So I can't simply always say to him, oh, what's your body trying to tell you, or where's the sadness, if I'm not able to, in a moment when I'm feeling emotional, express that to him. So I'll be saying to him, I'm feeling really angry right now that you're doing this, or I'm feeling really frustrated because I've asked you so many times to stop and you won't listen to me. So instead of me like going into reaction mode and yelling and saying, stop doing it, blah, 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 instead I'm owning it. So I'm owning the feeling that I'm having.
Naming it. Naming it brings it out of the shadows.
It does. And it's also important not to, and I think initially when I embarked on a lot of this approach, it was to kind of go, well, this is my stuff, so I'm keeping it separate from him and I'm just going to have to deal with it. But when you do that, you're also, nudging into repression, which isn't healthy. And it also doesn't model for children how to move through emotions, which is the best gift we can give them, because you can't get rid of emotions. They're there. They're part of who we are as humans. And it's just like, the parents who, if you were growing up and your parents did all of their fighting or all of their, whether it was fighting or healing or connecting again behind closed doors, that robs the children of being able to see how to resolve relationship conflicts. So just as much as it's important for parents to be present, with their kids around how to have an effective relationship, it's important for the mother or the father or whoever is triggered to be able to give voice to the trigger, to help move through the trigger themselves, and also demonstrate for the child how they can also take ownership of their own feelings and emotions. And then it doesn't need to be, the huffing off in, the stomping away in a huff, which even as adults we often do, right? Because we don't have the toolkit. We haven't ever learned to be vulnerable enough to speak our emotions and speak how we're feeling. We instead will have our own pattern for numbing those things. So you're giving voice to it. It's a big one, getting present, giving voice, and noticing the patterns. So seeing the patterns of my language, or seeing the patterns in what is it, what's the consistency here between what's pushing my buttons to join the dots. And then it's going back and seeing how those things benefit me, how can I love them, what's he trying to get me to own, all that stuff. And how can I be grateful for those things? And doing that work just makes you, it really makes you see how much our kids are here to teach us. And it's quite humbling, I think. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to be resenting my child. I don't want a life like that. And so I think that the more I can own about what they're presenting to me, the more that I can free him to grow as he needs to, and the more that I can free myself to grow as I need to, free of that baggage. What do you do?
Oh, yeah, that's like you're just speaking my mirror. Like, I'm like sitting going, yes. But how nice is it even just, I mean, I know all of this philosophy, but it's so beautiful just to be reminded of it. Like, I'm sitting here going, there's learnings I can totally, yes, of course, yes. I mean, I know it all, but so nice just to rehear it, like to really saturate yourself in it again and again.
And that's what it takes, right? Because unless we do that often, we will go back to our unconscious ways and our unconscious patterning. Because if you think about it, that's what we've lived, and up until this point, like every parent pretty much will start off unconscious.
Yes.
And it's only if you're making a conscious choice to own what your child, your baby, your pregnancy, your whatever is presenting for you, is that you will start to transform that patterning. Yes. So it has a massive hold on us.
Yeah, it really does.
I don't think that you can immerse yourself in it enough, really, because it's a daily practice.
Yeah, it like 100% is. And I cruise, and then I hit a bump. So as you can hear, I've got a cold. It's head cold, nasty. And I know I'm hitting a total upper limit, and that's why it's coming in. Like And
I've just ridden mine out. Like I'm just on the edge of it.
I know, how funny is that? We're like, we're in perfect opposite sync, really.
Yeah. Which is why you're still hearing this podcast.
Yeah, right? So I'm turning up. That's what I said to myself. As you can hear, it's raining as well, and it's winter. And I was like going, I do not want to leave the house to podcast. I want to curl up in bed. And I'm here. I just kept having that thought in my head going, you just have to show up. You just have to show up.
Yeah.
So here I am. I haven't brought terribly much this time, but I'm here. I've showed up. But it's that whole thing of I can cruise when I have a lot of spaciousness within myself.
Yeah.
But when I'm hitting an upper limit like I have now, I've hustled mega hard last week to get our course up and running.
Yeah.
which is completely ace, but 100% threw out my feminine and my balance, like just lost it. And a major clashing of values between family and business. Career. Yeah, which for me is like the hardest clash of any of my values. And so here I am hitting an upper limit that has manifested in a cold, right? And making me mega cranky and really having to dig super deep in the relationships that are now in my family, because that, you know, that I've got to that kind of resourcelessness.
I'd love you to touch on, because a big leap for you was your 2-year-old and how much you weren't able to be present with her last week.
Yeah, it was really hard.
And because we talked a lot about what kind of the mirror our kids are presenting to us. But what about when you had to own that it was your stuff that you were plugged into, not being there for her, and that she was, you know, it was reflecting back to you, right?
Yes.
But that you also had to make that distinction between how much of it was her stuff and how much of it was your stuff.
Yeah.
Because that was an interesting one for you to have to face in the midst of all this, like, intense hustling.
It was intense hustling, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. It was really hard. And, it's just, you know how you come in and out of those peaks and troughs of super deep diving within yourself, and then you're out and cruising again with your new toolkit, and then you dive deep again. So I'm in a dive deep, which is great, right? Because it only ever comes out of super, super hard stuff. So it's been a super hard week where I've had to face like every single one of my top values, the clashing of them, the realigning of them. Like I've hit that phase. The upper limit of what I perceived was where I was capable of being at and where I want to stretch to. Like all of that stuff produces pain. That manifests in difficulty and challenge in the things that I hold dearest, really. That's what happens, right? To get us to grow with the wisdom of the depth of the stuff that we love the most.
Yes.
And I'm fucking fighting it. And here I am with a cold. You know, like it's really kind of perfect. And like zero patience, that's why I'm listening to you going, yes, my God, thank you, because this is like what I needed to hear to get back there.
To get back into that alignment again.
Yes, because I've come so far out of alignment and had to re-question everything. I really need to redo what is going on here and how am I aligning.
And this, you know, this is, talks beautifully to what we, include in our 7 tips, a must-have guide for alignment and connection, because that's really it. You cannot give that spaciousness or give that presence
if you can't give it to yourself.
If you can't give it to yourself, it is actually impossible.
Yes.
And then it's inauthentic.
Yes.
Then it's just lip service. Then it's your kid, if they could talk, eloquently about it, would be saying, Mum, you're saying all this stuff, but you're doing something else because you're giving me all this presence and you're trying to be all open and hearing me.
Actually, I just have the perfect example of that. It's popped into my head and I'm going to share. It's pretty vulnerable. I'm going to share it because it's funny now that we're having this conversation tonight. And we're having the most amazing conversations in our private group for this course that we're watching, the group of women. We have these discussions where we delve into all of this stuff and how it relates to their lives. And I'm like mega into it. And so I'm trying to fit it into my day today when I had 6 kids to look after and it's school holidays and, and I'm sick, right? But I'm so into it that I want to keep finding moments to do it. And so I find myself multitasking so I can just quickly look at my computer or whatever. So I had my 2 girls sitting down having dinner because my son was out at a sleepover. And I've like mega hustled through dinner, multitasked that to get it on the table so that I can sit down with them with my computer in front of me so I can, get back onto this group. And I can hear them both talking, so I'm like half-assed joining in on the conversation. I'm not really present to them at all. And so my 2-year-old turns around and bites me.
Oh, wow.
Bites my arm and it like fucking hurt.
Yes.
And I like snapped so hard, like back.
Oh my gosh.
Not that I slapped her like that, but like snapped reality check like so hard back where I went, fuck, that really hurt. And then I looked at her and I went, oh. I get what's at play here.
I know what that's about.
So that's only because it's funny, right? Because I can see how you could take that just as bad behaviour.
Yeah.
But in actual fact, I'd missed the lighter cues, and so she'd gone for the hard guns to bring me back into presence with her.
But that's it, right? Because it's her, but it's also you. Because if you're feeling guilty about sitting,
which I totally was.
Yeah, so you called that in because you were like, I feel guilty. I need to be punished for my guilt that I'm feeling. Chomp. Oh, that's gold.
This is where I'm at with my head goal this week. So I'm like not the Zen master to be having this conversation with this week.
But I think that brings the heart and the reality to it, because Lord knows there's days where I'm like, conscious parenting, what? You know?
Yeah.
Because we're human.
Yeah, we are. And it's beyond that. It's about looking at why you're where you are.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, because you can answer, because
it doesn't just happen to you.
No, that's right. I mean, you can let yourself off the hook and say we're human, but until you take the path of learning and seeking out the growth.
Yes, because when I'm in alignment with myself, I have the spaciousness that, is infinite.
Yes.
And the ability to tap in and connect and to love and hold presence and flowing out of everything delicious to everyone around me.
Yeah.
So the question of when that isn't happening is why isn't it happening for me? Not for them, for me. Why can't I provide that for myself and therefore for them? Because they're my mirror. So why can't I provide that to my inner child or to my lover or to my, whatever? It's all self-reflective. So I think it's easy to go, we all have shit days. Yes, we do. But it's about how you approach the shitness as well.
Yeah.
Do you just wipe it off and go, oh, well, tomorrow's a new day? Or do you go, how have I got here?
Yeah.
And what am I going to do to change that?
And that is the critical path.
Because you are, just freaking loving hard on that Invictus quote, that you are the master of your destiny or whatever it is.
I'm the captain of my ship, I'm the master of my soul or something.
Something like that.
Yeah.
I wish I remembered it. Like that. I have a head cold, I'm blaming that. Maybe it's just I don't want to remember it.
Yeah.
But it's that whole idea of to take ownership of what the masterful role is you play in creating your universe.
It's really, do you want to be a victim of your history, which is, we all have shit days, or do you want to be the master of your destiny? Okay, what can I learn from my shit day?
Yeah, that's right.
That's the difference.
It is totally different. And when you're learning from the shit day, it's a golden day.
Yeah, and it's no longer bad, or you no longer want to never repeat it, because you actually saw that, oh wow, I learned this and this about myself and how I can change the situation and what I didn't know before but I now see clearly, that's all like golden stuff.
Yeah, it really seriously is.
Yeah.
So when I think about how to answer your question, bringing it back into how do you handle triggers, I am thinking like there's almost two parts of me, because there's two answers, right? There's resourceful me, who has a completely different tactic, and there's resourceless me, who has a completely different tactic, because I'm in survival mode.
Yeah.
I'm in, what is the most desperate thing I can do to just pull everybody out of this in the best way possible, as opposed to over here where, we can like go to town.
Where you have time and space and presence and all of those wonderful things.
Yes, all of that stuff. So when I'm in resourcelessness, it's about making time to rest and tune back in, in the day. And then when I'm in a trigger moment, it's seriously as closed in as it's got almost nothing to do with my child, and it's got everything to do with how am I going to, one, I don't want to say keep the beast caged, but deal with my beast. Give it an outlet. Yeah. Because I can so easily fly back in those moments into just hideous parenting shit from my childhood. And I can totally embody that when it comes out. I want to say to play, but it's not to play, it's to hurt.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's a level of that just feels great.
Because it's the ultimate form of expression, and
it's a release, and it becomes all about them, and they're so wrong, and I just get to feel so good. Which of course I don't, because I'm totally self-imploding as it's happening, and then afterwards it's even worse, right? But because I know I have that within me, I can't give it an inch.
Does that mean you haven't lost
because it'll take a mile. Yeah, look, I definitely have work to do on that, 100%. But when I'm just talking about in terms of coming from the conscious parenting dynamic and where I sit within myself and what I want my kids exposed to and not, my spectrum of what it means to fuck up is maybe a shorter spectrum to what it means to other people.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't want to become physical. I don't want to, I'm losing my voice, which is very interesting, create, hugely perceived traumatic moments in their childhood like mine.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's how do I avoid that to the point where, and I find an outlet for the beast. Like it's not that I don't, but it's when I'm in the resourcelessness stage that becomes an issue.
And these can be really practical things. It's like, going to swimming a couple of times a week, having time that's just for you. These don't have to be like, grand things or, deep inner work. It can be a mix of different things.
Yes.
And it's a different recipe for all of us as to what it is that fills our cup.
Yeah, and it's having an outlet, and it's also about, look, I haven't loved the beast to the extent that you're talking about when we're talking about how, the benefits to essentially my inner child on the flip side. I haven't done enough deep work on that because it's such a painful void for me.
Yeah.
But I've done it to the extent of I'm not willing to sacrifice my darkness for my light.
Yes.
So I recognise that the path to my light is through accepting and loving the dark aspects. And so I'm not willing to say you're not okay, you're not allowed, anger has no place, because I don't believe that at all.
No.
I just don't want to move over into this spectrum of abuse.
Yeah, yeah.
So if I'm in resourcelessness, it's literally, and because I have been a parent for over a decade now, and because I know I've always had this beast and I've been on this course, I have like a toolkit of ways back to balance for me, which include back to balance for that beast. So it's an outlet for anger. So it'll be like hardcore dancing with really loud music, or running up and down on the spot, or yelling into my pillow, or just walking outside and taking a breath and stretching open my chest space, or it'll be melting into a puddle of tears. I know my toolkit well enough with triggers now about how to bring myself out of the yes. So I'm just very intimately aware of when I'm resourceless, that I very front of mind have that list.
Yeah.
I don't need it front of mind when I'm resourceful.
No, because it has no requirement to be there.
No, I don't need it. But I'm very aware of when I'm not, that I need to be really careful about how I handle myself. And so in doing that, when I'm triggered, that's really where I'm at. And then I'll spend some time when I'm feeling calmer and I've put probably some work back in, cups of tea, sitting down, crying, chatting, whatever it is to bring myself back. I'll spend some time journaling it, and then I'll get the mirror and I'll get the purpose of it being there.
Yeah, yeah.
But in the moment, I just need to handle my beast.
Yeah.
So, when I'm resourceful, it's exactly what you were saying. It's sitting in the moment. It's really allowing myself to be physically and emotionally open to my child and receiving of whatever is coming out for them. And it's those times that I love the hard shit. I have no issues putting boundaries in, because I want to extract the gold out of bringing that emotion out of the shadows and pulling out, to the bottom of it and seeing what's under there. And, that sweet spot of empathy when you can just eat them up. They're so divine and their tears are just so heartfelt. And, I
really love that you made that distinction between that resourcefulness versus the resourcelessness sides of ourselves, because it's really so true, isn't it? Like, we can have all these wonderful toolkits, but if we're unable to first, there's times where we can't even remember our toolkit, let alone access it. And those are those times when you're feeling completely tapped out, you got nothing.
Yeah.
And as mothers, that's a reality.
Yeah, it is. And it is, but at the same time, I don't want to say that should be your normal or acceptable, because it's not. Yeah. I'm, as much as I'm saying I'm here right now, I also recognise that is not normal and that is not my normal.
To always be operating from that.
And I don't accept it as my normal, and therefore I'm willing to do the work and put in place the steps to bring myself back into alignment, because I recognize I'm out of balance. I don't think you need to live out of balance, and therefore I don't think being resourcelessness is what motherhood is, because I know it's not. Like the other 80% of the time, I know it's over here in such like heart-exploding, profound connection and awakening. Like I know that's what motherhood is. So when I'm over here and I'm tapped out and I'm resourceless and I'm cranky and I'm nasty, it's about why am I there when I know I can be here? And therefore not accepting it, therefore saying I'm willing to put back into me to do that. And that isn't just la-di-da having a manicure and I need time away from my kids, because that is such a freaking Band-Aid.
I really love that, you know, it's obviously been your 10 years of parenting that have got you to the point at somewhere along the line where you realised, oh, it's not about them. I actually need to give to me first. Was there a key point for you where you decided, because a lot of mothers still can't own this, that it's first I must give to me to get myself into alignment so that I can give the presents?
Geez, that's a tough question. Do I think there was a moment? No, I think it was bringing conscious awareness to the number of moments where it felt so amazing and working out the recipe. Why was I there? Why could I get a whispering or an inkling of that, but then I was back here and I didn't like being here. But the pain of being here was enough to make me do the work to get over there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it's literally about bringing enough consciousness, which is the hard work, right? Like no one's sitting, you and I are not sitting here going, you know, consciousness is just so freaking beautiful because it's like the total opposite of that. Like talk about breeding the fantasy and the nightmare, right? Because the real doing work of consciousness is hard slog stuff.
Yeah.
And you and I have said, I know I have said this so many times, don't look at my beautiful birth experiences and think I didn't put a lot of hard fucking work behind that to have that.
Yeah.
Don't look at my beautiful marriage and think that I haven't put a whole lot of hard fucking work to get there. Don't look at my beautiful parenting and think I haven't put a whole lot of hard fucking work to get there.
Yeah.
Like it's not the fantasy that you see, it's that you know you can get there and you seek it through the hard stuff. Now I'm off on my, soapbox. Anyway.
No, I think it's really, really relevant, and I think it needs to be said. It doesn't just magically.
And really, I'm just saying it to myself, right? I mean, really, this is the mirror, and everything I'm saying is like so poignant for me right now.
This podcast really is like therapy.
Like seriously, like the whole time you've been talking, I'm like, yeah.
Oh, I love it.
And I plan on doing that, right? And today was the last day of tough just had to slog through, and I know from tomorrow I've got the next 5 days to get myself back.
Yeah.
And I've created the space and time to do that, and I have intention in doing that and how that's going to look for me and therefore for my family. So hopefully next time we podcast and you hear us, I'll be like back. No guarantees. But this is it as well. Like I think there's a gift in hearing the trenches of it as well, though, isn't there? Like this is me suffering like through this week.
Yeah.
And here I am, and I have to show up, and you have to hear it.
I love it though. I love it, and it's the same if anybody in our course is listening and they pay close attention to me in the videos. There's a lot of times where we have to edit it because I'm coughing, or maybe we didn't edit it because we didn't.
You actually didn't I hardly edited them, and there wasn't terribly much coughing in them, which is actually interesting. But either side of the recordings, there were. I remember that.
So we're both on our own little path of
seriously breaking through our preconceived notions of everything.
Yeah,
and it's hard.
Big stuff.
Yeah, it is. So, and hopefully the rain hasn't been too bad for you guys while you're listening to.
I'm hoping it sounds like a little bit of radio distortion, but hopefully you can still hear
noise.
Us.
Maybe it could just be beautiful rain meditation.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I like that. That's a nice vibe. Let's go with that.
So, Bridget, my voice is seriously going. You give us the wrap up.
Yes. So, gosh, there's been so much in this podcast. I think I'm going to have to listen to it a couple of times. I hope we've made sense. But really, it's around to be conscious to our children, we have to first give consciousness to ourselves. And we know that that is not always an easy path, so it's a path of going gently. And it's a path of creating space when you can to really hear yourself and what you need so that you can hear your children and what they need and who they are, essentially, beyond our projections and beyond our idealistic notions of who they should and shouldn't be. Because all they should ever be is themselves, just like all we should ever be is ourselves. And that's the beauty of it. So if you want to connect with Jules, it's
thepleasurenutritionist.com.
And for me, it's suburbansandcastles.com. And we will see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.